This is a site where the police department is planning to build a training facility that in Atlanta is known as Cop City.
Cop City will never be built. That's it. Hey! Cop City will never be built. Cop City will never be built.
We don't want Cop City here, and we don't want it anywhere.
Thank you.
Atlanta police are now charging 23 people with domestic terrorism after what police call a coordinated attack.
It's not a cop city. This is for police officers, firefighters, emergency medical responders. This is for our safety.
After a shootout near Cop City left a protester dead and a Georgia State Patrol trooper wounded.
Your men well died for this.
Yeah.
Was it worth it?
We will see.
Atlanta has been called the city in a forest. This 300-acre section of city-owned land in the South River Forest is one of Atlanta's largest remaining green spaces. It's also now at the center of the national debate over policing in this country. In March of 2021, city leaders proposed a new 85-acre, $90 million training center for police and firefighters. Almost immediately, opponents start calling it Cop City. Instant backlash.
Stop Cop City!
For some, Stop Cop City becomes this sort of rallying cry. Protesters argue that destroying parts of the forest would hurt the community. They also fear the facility will help further militarize the police.
Why do you think it's in your neck of the woods?
Environmental racism, racialized capitalism, and the fact that those people who live there cannot vote against it. So it makes it a perfect storm.
The police training facility would be built in predominantly black and middle-class DeKalb County. But since DeKalb residents aren't technically part of Atlanta, they don't have any representation on city council.
I think a lot of people might have heard the term, and they might have maybe seen and heard sound bites on social media, but I think that there are a lot of people who just don't know what's really going on.
Kiana Jones is an organizer for Community Movement Builders. She's on a mission to convince Atlanta city officials to reject the training center.
I'm gonna write down your name and phone number, but I'm gonna give you one of these stickers too.
I mean, I don't really understand why they're doing it.
When you're having those longer conversations, we can hit all the interesting points because people are going to ask questions, they're going to have rebuttals.
Well, I got my own opinion, but I think it's a good thing.
Have you gone to this house yet?
No. Okay, I'll go right here.
You know, this is all because they see that in 2020, when the police murdered one of our brothers, the people said they weren't going to have it. And, you know, they weren't able to control us the way they wanted to, and so they want to practice that even more.
You got work to do. So you see, you'll get this done in a jiffy, and while you do this, I will make your lunch, okay? So even if not for myself, I can't let my children down. I can't let my community down, because my life is not my own. It's for the people that I can affect by doing good with it.
I'm worried about if people are going to be out for my mom and if she's going to get hurt in the work that she does, because I do know that it's very risky for her to do it, and I just want her to be safe.
The intersectionality of this movement cannot be denied. It affects us all.
You have people who care about the environment. You have people who believe that Cop City would exacerbate all of the issues that are negative in community. All kinds of people, black, white, trans, indigenous people.
Now, this is the training facility Atlanta police had been using until 2021. A former elementary school built in the 1950s, now condemned. Evidence of the building's past lives? Everywhere. Atlanta Police Chief Darren Shirebaum showed us around.
And so we have to, as a profession, continue to evolve to be good at what we do and to be trusted by the community. And if we're not providing the proper training facilities and programming, then we're going to fail in one or both of those areas.
The project's official website claims the goal is to provide modern equipment and more socially just models of policing. The planned facility will include modern classrooms, a new shooting range, even a mock city. We're talking about fake apartment buildings, a nightclub, and gas stations as well, settings where officers can practice de-escalation and other crisis intervention techniques. Not just law enforcement, but firefighters and emergency medical responders will also train here.
We're aware of the historic disconnects that exist and have existed between us and the communities we're working to protect. And the reason we have 35 weeks of training, it helps us determine, should you even wear this uniform?
What do you make of the public outcry so far, the criticisms?
So the thing that really strikes home for me is, are we militarizing our police? That is a national point of concern. And I can say this as a chief of police, I will never lead a militarized police department. What I have to do is lead a group of men and women that are ready to counter any emergency that will arise in the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. Look across our nation in the last year. We've had active shooting events at 4th of July parades. We have active shooting events inside of schools, at gay clubs, at shopping center, and houses of worship. We have to be ready for that.
So the original plans for this space actually changed. In 2017, Atlanta City Planning Department declares parts of the South River Forest will become green spaces, open to the public. But in 2021, then Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms unveils plans for the training facility instead.
But I'm confident that at the end of this work, Atlanta will influence public safety policies across the nation.
Let me hear you say justice for the people. 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 Justice for the people.
Just because we don't want Cop City does not mean that I believe cops should not be trained.
I live at ground zero of this unjust atrocity.
Stop Cop City. There's no one here that have said that they want it.
During a city council meeting earlier this week, we counted 288 people that stood to speak, and just about all of them were opposed to the plan. Why hasn't there been more vocal support from folks who support it?
Yeah, you know, I was on city council for 8 years, and now most people that step to mics are rarely saying, "Good job, guys." Right? So when you city council meetings, school board meetings, you know, the silent majority are usually at home.
It really is hard to get an accurate picture of who supports it because there's been limited polling and those in favor aren't necessarily as vocal. But opponents are everywhere. What's playing out in Atlanta echoes what's happening nationwide. In 2020, communities across the country start demanding change. Many want tax money to flow from traditional policing to alternatives, investing in mental health services, affordable housing, better education.
Your whole force is embarrassment to the nation.
Minneapolis redirects $8 million of its police budget to policing alternatives after George Floyd's murder. Louisville bans no-knock warrants after Breonna Taylor is killed. And Denver bans chokeholds. But a year after those cries to defund the police, the pendulum swings back. Many American cities restore funding to their police departments, with some proposing to spend even more. On a national level, bipartisan efforts at police reform have failed in Congress. And federal police funding has actually increased under President Biden, $1.7 billion more in 2022 than the previous year. You would acknowledge that police need to be trained.
They do. And they have been, right? So with all of the training that they've been getting for decades upon decades, they are still disproportionately killing Black people. They are still choosing when to use restraint and when not to. So I don't know that it's really an issue of the training. Perhaps it's more of an issue of culture.
I want you to take a look at what they're using to try and keep folks from breaching the facility. A number of police vehicles, a number of uniformed cops on the inside as well. You've got folks who are here day and night making sure that protesters don't breach this fence. The training site provokes nearly 2 years of protests in Atlanta, drawing activists from all over the country and inflaming tensions between police and the community even more. To keep the wooded area from being cleared, a group of protesters known as the Forest Defenders camp on site for months. They sabotage construction equipment, hurl rocks, fireworks, and Molotov cocktails at police and contractors.
Dozens of protesters have been arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. Is that fair?
You know, my job as the mayor of the city of Atlanta is to make sure that people are safe and to make sure that if crime is in place, that the crime is stopped. From that point on, it goes to a judge, it goes to the DA, they render and issue the charges.
So it sounds like you do think that there were protesters who were domestic terrorists.
There were protesters there that were doing their protests by marching, by shouting, by doing the things that in the city of Atlanta, we are very open to. This is the home of the civil rights movement. We're okay with that. But when you throw Molotov cocktails as your attempt to cause destruction, then you are going to be arrested.
In 2017, Georgia changes its domestic terrorism law amid a rise in white nationalist extremism. But the new law broadens its definition. Property damage is now, technically, domestic terrorism if it aims to intimidate the government and change policy. That's the state's argument against 42 protesters so far. A conviction for domestic terrorism in Georgia carries a sentence of 5 to 35 years in prison. The protests turned deadly this past January. Georgia State Police shoot and kill a Forest Defender activist named Manuel Esteban Paez-Terán, who went by the nickname Tortuguita. Terán and others are part of that group camping out to stop development when police move in to clear the encampment. At some point, shooting starts. The official autopsy shows Terán gets shot 57 times.
No, it was a horrible crime. I don't understand why they have to be so cruel.
Terán's mother, Belkis, agrees to talk to us for her first network sit-down interview.
Manuel was a very joyful person, very caring. He was a very special person. Yeah, that's what is so hard.
The Georgia Bureau of Investigation concludes Terán shot first and wounded a state trooper. A ballistics report suggests the bullet came from a gun investigators say belonged to Terán. But on body cam footage of the aftermath, you can actually see and hear a police officer questioning if the trooper was shot by fellow police. The state's autopsy isn't able to determine how Terán's body was positioned when the shooting happened. But a separate autopsy, commissioned by the Terán family, finds that exit wounds in both palms indicate both hands were raised when Tortuguita is killed. Have you forgiven the officers who shot Manuel?
I never felt angry with them. I think it's the system. The system is corrupted. We have to accept the situation, but not be stupid. I took the torch from Manuel to continue, and now Mama. So I spread the ashes in the forest. His ashes are still there and will be there. I don't want a cop city. Manuel didn't want it, and I don't want it either. The children need this land for the future. We will do as much as we can as a community, because now I'm part of the community.
On June 5th, more than 300 people packed City Hall for a meeting that lasts more than 16 hours. In the end,
the vote is 11 yeas, 4 nays. The motion to adopt as amended carries.
Atlanta City Council approves $31 million in taxpayer money for the training center. The funding for the $90 million facility will come from taxpayers and the Atlanta Police Foundation, a nonprofit that wants the training center built. APF receives millions in donations from some of America's biggest companies like Delta, Waffle House, and Home Depot. Construction is expected to begin in August.
It does seem interesting, I think, to a lot of folks that in just the span of 2 or 3 years in this city and around the country, We've gone from defund the police to, you know what, we should build a $90 million training facility for the police. Does that strike you at all as a bit of a contradiction?
So this is a nuanced national conversation. So it's not just about the talking points of defunding the police or the talking points of, a cop city. No, this is about how to make sure that we do safety right, de-escalation tactics, teaching people how to resolve conflict. So we're doing co-responder models versus just police going out there dealing with mental health cases.
When we think about policing and we think about prevention of crime, we have to talk about the root causes of crime. And that goes back to unstable housing, insufficient food, lack of employment, lack of education, all of the things that affect people because of wealth inequality.
What would you say, though, to those who would say, you had an opportunity to oppose the project. Mm-hmm. People spoke their mind, public hearings, they wrote letters, they sent emails, and there was a vote. And it passed. Mm-hmm. And folks should accept the consequences of that vote.
Should they? What I would say is, would you have said that to Martin Luther King when he marched for voting rights? Because people love to bring up the name of Dr. King. Would you have said that to John Lewis when he walked across the Pettus Bridge? Would you have said that to anyone that has stood against a law that was unjust? For me, this is my civil rights movement, because the right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, have an adequate green space where my children are not harassed by police, that is a civil right to me.
Ain't gonna let Cop City turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let Cop City turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.